Westminster back in the good old days. We did run a club down here. Before that, my dad had run a club in the same location, so I just inherited our premises, really. It was the 60s. My dad had run it with a guy called Jerry Wolfson from Dublin, who ran the little Melody Lane music store at the bottom of 6th Street, just near Columbia. Anybody remember that? It was a place to get guitar lessons. There was here, and there was Tartini's up the hill. And Jerry Wolfson was another Irish fella. So here's this Irish Catholic young guy, this Irish Jewish guy, two of them, and they're running this club because they thought they could cash in on the folk music boom, the old beatnik days, right? And we have to remember, New Westminster was once this thriving seaport town. The boats used to come in all along the river, and again, when we were kids, we'd go down on the weekend and try to meet sailors and kick a football around with a soccer ball, because that's the one thing that they wanted to do when they've been out at sea for so long. And we would come down here and try and lure the sailors into playing soccer with us so that they would give us stamps and coins. And sometimes they would invite you up onto the boats, and then you would get to bring these things back to school for show and tell. Those were the good old days. New Westminster was great. So there were always lots of nightlife up and down the street here, great bands, lots of rocking places, lots of pubs, and of course everybody knew in New West you could drink underage here. We know the police here, don't we? So you could drink underage here until, of course, just after 5 o'clock. In the afternoon, when they would suddenly remember to ask you for your ID, and you would go, oh, I'll be right back, I've left it out in the car, which meant get out of here because the regular guys are coming in from the mill, right, or from the brewery to drink. So that's what we did. We used to run a club here, and a lot of the great bands came out here. Remember Mother Tuckers, Black Snake, and that got some of us into that whole psychedelic scene. And then I got invited to start writing about it for a local newspaper. That was how it happened, and then the San Francisco thing happened. And I remember my first night down in San Francisco, I went to the Fillmore Ballroom, and I had to write a story for the newspaper, and I thought, well, I'll talk to this guy, Bill Graham, that ran the Fillmore. You could meet anybody in those days. The stage was about this high in the Fillmore, just off, it was dancing. And I had an introduction to him from the guy that ran the Retinal Circus down in Vancouver, Roger Schiffer. He said, say hi to Bill for him. Oh, okay. I said hi to Bill for him, and Bill didn't know who I was talking about. But he wanted to be nice to me, but he wanted to get rid of me, this young kid from Vancouver trying to write a story. And so he said, hang on. And he comes back with somebody who'd just been singing. And he said, here, there's a young guy from Vancouver from a newspaper. Maybe you can talk to him. And this young woman who'd been singing with the band kindly came and sort of knelt down here. And she had these incredibly high platform elevator shoes made out of clear, like hard plastic, and she had these baggy purple silk pants on and a top and this wet, sweaty hair and a bottle of Southern Comfort in her hand. And it was Janis Joplin. So that was my first interview as a journalist. It was a good start. Anyway, back to Vancouver. Founded by Mona Furtig, a Vancouver poet, the Literary Storefront thrived in Vancouver from 1978 to 85. A unique literary center and cultural institution, it was situated on the historic Gastown area near the Pacific Coast Inner Harbor waterfront. During its heyday, the storefront had some 500 members, poets, playwrights, novelists, readers, editors, publishers, journalists, teachers, and everything in between. And during its first 2 years alone, drew more than 13,000 people to its diverse events, as well as for its lending library of rare books by mainly Canadian authors. People gravitated here for individual reasons, to meet, to talk, to learn about writing, publishing, the world of books and literature. Some came for comradeship and open access solidarity. Many came simply to see or hear or rub shoulders with an amazing range of established literary personalities. The Literary Storefront's hundreds of public readings and workshops drew among, this is where you could meet them all, among others, Margaret Atwood, Michael Ondaatje, Dorothy Livesey, Jane Rule, somebody over here took workshops with Jane, Al Purdy, Earl Burney, Bill Bissett, Audrey Thomas, Lawrence Ferlinghetti from City Lights, P.K. Page, Sir Stephen Spender, Edward Albee, Elizabeth Smart. There was a Homeport reading base too for the West Coast own-growing legion of writers, Roy Kiyuka, Susan Musgrave, Keith Millard, Carolan Zanello, Maxine Gadd, Peter Trower, and scores of others were familiar headliners. Yet the Literary Storefront was never about simply one thing. It wasn't about readings or just performances. Canada had seen nothing like it previously, nor has it since. This book of oral history and archival research recounts the visionary Literary Storefront project begun by Mona Fertig, the daughter of Vancouver painter George Fertig, who used to live on Southwest Marine Drive, just over near Trap Road. And it was continued for a time by a collective and a pair of Americans, Wayne Holder and Tom Hilpus, the latter who would emerge surprisingly on the world political stage, and who is currently the president of the small country of Estonia, and has to deal with Vladimir Putin on a regular basis. When Fertig published her own book about her father, as the third in Mother Tongue Publishing's Unheralded Artists of BC series, it was difficult not to observe how the memory of the literary storefront itself was fading in the same romantic twilight. I knew a number of the artists cited in her book and saw that they too, like veteran writers associated with the 50s and 60s, were vanishing stories. As if in confirmation, two recent studies for an ambitious and expensive literary art center in Vancouver make no reference or recognition of the history of Vancouver's first grassroots literary center. So this book will serve as a necessary archival document for students of BC history. Just like a new book called No Regrets that's come out, which recounts the kind of leftist, socialist political history of Vancouver during the 60s and 70s and 80s. Our generation seems to be recovering this. There's another book about the music scene from the 60s and 70s by Jerry Cruz, who ran the Afterthought on 4th Avenue. So a whole raft of books of this kind are coming out from our generation now, reminding us who we are, reminding the next generation who it was, and help set things the way they are now. I had my own start as a serious writer during the heyday of the old storefront after returning to Vancouver from several years in Northern California. When I began asking old friends and colleagues for recollections of the literary storefront, this led organically to inquiries among an even wider circle of writer contacts. Literally, everyone I spoke with remembered the centrality of the storefront years as a unique moment in the West Coast literary and cultural history. As the nature and scope of the conversation itself grew, the storefront began to assert itself again in memory. For almost everyone, the storefront had served as more than just a stop on the path to establishing a career. It had served as a society of friends. And if, like most who congregated there, you didn't have a lot of money in your pockets, that was all right too. For a time, this was Vancouver's bohemian consular center. If you wanted to know about the zen of writing, to get your mojo working at a first open mic reading, or engage in deliberations with other fledgling writers, or read their work on the shelves on the wall, then this was the place for you. During the run of the storefront, Vancouver was still an old seaport town. The World Expo of 1986 that would accelerate the demolition of heritage buildings and change the city's architectural face irrevocably had yet to happen. Downtown, the Hastings Street Tenderloin, if rugged, was not the combat zone the provincial and city authorities would allow to fester there. It still housed the city's best newsagents, a variety of colorful pawn shops, the War, the Cobbler, and the landmark-only seafood cafe. Nearby, Chinatown was still thriving, and the back alley Green Door and Red Door restaurants, the BC Royal Cafe on Pender Street, were old reliables. The Ho-Ho at East Pender and Columbia remained the city's unofficial late-hours eatery for musicians and for jazz lovers. And 2 short blocks away, Vi's 9-table chicken and steakhouse at 209 Union Street still had legs until '79, serving up what locals could relate to as soul food. It wasn't perfect, but Vancouver was a town of possibility. Architect Arthur Erickson had earned international renown. Bill Reed was associated with the Pacific Coast Native Art Renaissance. Jean Coulthard was a nationally important composer, and BC poet Phyllis Webb was an equally respected radio broadcaster. Painter Joe Plaskett, although long a resident of Paris, still called the old capital city of New Westminster, a drive up Kingsway, home, as did novelist Sheila Watson. Yeah, when are we going to get a memorial for Sheila Watson in this town, somewhere down near Douglas College, where she lived on Royal Avenue? It's about time, everyone.